If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Cheri Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today's guest is Dr. Cheri Mah, a leading sleep physician and performance expert who has worked with the world's top athletes, executives, and high achievers. In this episode, we dive into the critical role of sleep in cognitive and physical optimization, uncover the small habits that make a huge difference, and explore why sleep is your ultimate performance enhancer. If you've ever wondered how to unlock your full potential simply by changing your sleep habits, this conversation is for you. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm here with Dr. Cheri Mah, and we're going to talk about my favorite topic in performance, and that is sleep. Dr. Mah, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. I'm so thrilled to be here.
It's a pleasure and a real honor to have you on. And we've started working together, I think, when I was in Toronto. But years before that, I came to learn of your work and started introducing sleep science and sleep monitoring when I was with the Brooklyn Nets. And then when we moved into Toronto, it was really a pillar of our program. And we were just thrilled to have you come in and work with our group. And it was transformational for the success of our program.
No, it was wonderful getting to work with you over so many years and excited to continue highlighting the importance of sleep right now.
Yeah, very much so. So how about we start with a bit of background? How did you come to this work?
So my background, I am a sleep physician by training and research scientist. My specialization is really focused on enhancing sleep and maximizing performance for elite and professional athletes, as well as professional sports teams and high performers. So I got involved in the sleep field over 20 years ago. I was an undergraduate at Stanford University and had the privilege to be mentored by the father figure of the sleep field, Dr. William Dement. And he discovered REM sleep, or that dreaming sleep. And all of his early work has led to the development of our modern understanding of sleep medicine. And I just thought it was so interesting because each and every one of us sleeps and goes through this fascinating process every single night. Yet many of us disregard it, sacrifice it, and overlook this essential part of our day. And I just thought it was so interesting what the interventions could be to enhance sleep and recovery. And that led me down this path of specifically working with elite athletes to show and quantify the cognitive and the physical performance benefits that can occur when you really prioritize such this foundational aspect of your health. And that's led me to interesting collaborations working with you and others in professional sports from the NBA, NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, now expanding towards military and F1 and other executives and high performers. And I've really enjoyed helping interpret the science and really apply that into real life practical strategies. So that was the applied work that led me down that path. And eventually I went back for medicine. So I am board certified in internal medicine and sleep medicine. So have a bit of the medical background as well.
Wow, what a journey. And it's a really fascinating one because so much of the sleep research, I think initially was around sleep and illness, right? So if we don't get sleep, what are the consequences? And you really flipped that to, if we do get sleep, what are the benefits?
That's exactly. Right. Earlier in the field, much of the research was around the negative consequences of sleep loss or sleep deprivation and how that can affect your cognitive, your physiologic, your physical performance. And those are very important to recognize,
Right.
especially as that is what most of us do experience day to day.
Hmm.
But I was most interested, well, what's the other half of the story? Which is what are the interventions we can do to enhance that recovery process, to pay back what we call accumulated sleep debt, and really try to enhance this particular aspect of sleep health.
Right. Yeah, I think there's so much there. As we shift from the negative to a more positive tilt. And that's really what I want us to dig into today. But briefly, before we get into that, let us know what's going on during sleep. Because so many people think it's like putting your phone on airplane mode, right? You're just unconscious for a period of time and then you wake up, right? And it's just this dead period that there's so much competition for, right? Meta don't make any money when you're asleep. Right? So everybody's trying to vie over that 8 hour block. What's going on that we should know about?
Oh, so sleep is a very active process for both your brain and your body. And there's a lot of different cognitive and physiological processes that are occurring during your sleep. And you go through different sleep stages and
Mhm,
therefore cycles during the nighttime. So you have light stages of sleep. That's when you're transitioning from your wakefulness into sleep. And then you have the second stage of sleep that's a little bit deeper than that. Then you go into deep sleep, where that's essential for muscle
mhm,
recovery, regeneration. You get the biggest pulse of growth hormone during that
mhm,
stage. And then you enter rapid eye movement sleep, or that dreaming stage of sleep, where you typically have most of your dreaming occur in this rapid eye movement period. And that cycle can be 90 to 120 minutes
mhm.
throughout the night, and you typically will get 5 to 6 cycles depending on how long you allow yourself to sleep. Now, like I said, it's a very active process, so
Mhm,
there's a lot of neuronal pruning that's important for learning and memory consolidation. There's a lot of impact on hormonal regulation with proper amounts of sleep. We
mhm,
also know that you're clearing out a lot of waste products during the daytime that build up.
mhm,
So, one of the more fascinating findings in the last decade is something called the glymphatic system, which
mhm,
is, think of it as your waste products and a system to clear out those toxins and the waste products that build up. Specifically, it is more active when you're sleeping. So more to
Wow.
come there, but it
Yeah.
is this process that is so essential for each and every one of us that it really is non-negotiable.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think there's so much emphasis put on the duration of our sleep. So how much should I get? But this really leans into the quality of the sleep, right? So it's important that we progress through the stages in that sequence and that they're not disrupted.
That's right. I think so many of us get really fixated on duration of sleep, which is important. And we know that you minimally should get as an adult 7 hours every night. That's the national recommendation by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society, where 7 hours is that minimum threshold. But that is the minimum amount. So you may
Right.
actually need 8 or 9 hours to feel refreshed in the daytime and to function
Hmm.
at your best. And that's okay if you're not there at 7. You can work up gradually. So I will encourage you to take even 15 minutes more sleep each day this week, because that will add up over time. And then build
Hmm.
on that until you reach that 7 hours. But to your point, the second important bucket is the quality of your rest. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of factors that go into that, from your sleep environment to your daytime habits, such as, are you getting morning sunlight? What is your caffeine and alcohol intake? What do you do in regards to naps? And then I will say the
Hmm.
third bucket that we'll throw in there is the timing of your sleep. We're starting to really
Right.
understand that it's not just the duration that's important, it's how consistent or inconsistent you are also with the bedtime and wake time.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And that extends sleep from being one part and really the anchor for the circadian rhythm overall. So, can you just tell us a little bit more about that? You mentioned some of those different stages through the day. Where does sleep fit into that circadian rhythm and how does it impact it and what goes on throughout that 24-hour period?
Sure. So your circadian rhythm is this natural 24-hour cycle that occurs in each of us that controls and impacts daily functions such
Mhm.
as hormonal regulation, influences your sleep and wake cycle, your core body temperature, and more. Now, it has an impact on your sleep cycles because it can help dictate when you do feel more or less alert to then be able to sleep at a desired time and to wake
Hmm.
at a specific time in the day. Now, it is a natural ebb and flow, so you will have these peaks in alertness. Many of you may realize in the morning time you feel a little bit more alert naturally, and after lunch, it's less about the food coma, but actually you have this natural dip in your circadian rhythm. Typically, that's when it's easiest to take a nap. And if you don't even take a nap, you'll see that typically you'll have a higher peak in alertness in the evening time. And that's that natural increase in that alertness in your biological clock.
And that's fascinating. And so that would lean into some of the work with high performers. Clearly, then, with the alertness, with the body temperature, there's going to be, for athletes, for example, there's going to be times where performance and practice and all this sort of stuff would be most effective, I guess.
Definitely. I think about the scheduling for not just my professional athletes, but for anyone who's a high performer. So
Hmm.
whether you're an executive, you're, in the leadership position, or really just trying to strive to be your best, thinking about what time of day you have these peaks and these troughs can be advantageous so that you actually schedule your meetings, your presentations, or for athletes when they're actually working out and increasing their core temperature so that it works in their favor to maximize performance. I will layer on that there's an element of your chronotype, which is
Hmm.
a little different from your body clock, but your chronotype is your natural predilection to be a morning lark or an evening owl. The morning larks prefer to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier versus an evening owl like to go to bed typically later and wake up later. And so
Right.
that is another factor layered on top of your body clock to consider when you have that natural tendency to feel more alert and ready to go. So if the bottom
Mm.
line is you use these factors to your advantage, you can work out, plan presentations, give important meetings or talks at times that work
Mhm.
in your favor.
So that's really fascinating, and you can see that coming into sport more and more. When we first started looking at this with the Nets, that was 2013, 14. You came in to help us in 16, 17, right around there, with the Leafs. What I've seen now, we're bringing the lessons of pro sport out into the everyday world. And so we're working with general population, with high achievers outside of the world of sport. And I'm still not seeing the priority or really the recognition of sleep as a top priority for executives and high performers in the real world. I don't think people are viewing themselves as pro athletes yet, where their performance can be modified. Are you seeing a similar thing as you're coming also out of sport and into this high achiever world outside sport?
That's a great observation. I do feel that a lot of the pro athletes over the last couple of years, there's been more of a wave and recognition that healthy sleep has to be a foundational element of their training. And I think that education is starting to permeate a little bit earlier, say at the collegiate level, or sometimes earlier than that too, which is great progress. I still think there's room for growth, but there are more top athletes that have been more vocal about how essential healthy sleep is to prioritize them at their ability to perform at their best, right? We have
Right.
the LeBron James saying they need 12 hours. Simone Biles says she needs 8 hours to be her best.
Hmm.
I can go on and on with the
Right.
list of pro
Right.
athletes, but I think that is changing in pro sport, and the impact I do think is starting to trickle down to other high performers outside of traditional sport. I think
Hmm.
there's more awareness in the media around healthy sleep. The impact it can have on chronic illness and longevity has
Right.
become a hotter topic recently.
Hmm.
And I do think it will take time, but there are leaders in industry that I think are trying to be models of how you should prioritize sleep for your teams and your employees.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's the Ariana Huffingtons who have
Right.
been pretty vocal in recent years about how important it is for her after she had her own health scare really from sleep deprivation trying to run her company. Or there's the Jeff Bezos, who say, I have to get 8 hours. Or I know Eric Schmidt from Alphabet has said, I have to get 8.5 hours to be at my best.
Mhm.
One of my favorite quotes is actually from Jeff Bezos when he talks about how, if I think better with sleep, I have more energy, I have more
Right.
focus, my mood is better. And he actually talks about the productivity because I think that's one
Right.
concern where people say, well, if I'm giving up time, is that's the perception, is I'm giving up time in my
Mhm.
day to sleep, then I'm going to be less productive. And
Right.
one, that's not true. There has been studies to show that for the first day, you may be more productive. This was shown with output in
Right.
military individuals. But then after that, you actually see a decrease in productivity with less sleep.
Mhm.
And so it's not that you're actually gaining more productivity or efficiency when you're choosing to spend a little bit more time investing in your sleep. Now, that said, Jeff Bezos, his quote is talking about how, as a senior exec, he says, I get paid to make a small number of high quality decisions.
Mhm.
And if I make like 3 good decisions in a day, like that should be enough. And to do that, he structures his day around his sleep. So he doesn't have any meetings. I think it's before lunch. He calls these like high
Wow.
quality IQ meetings. So I think it's an interesting
Right.
example of someone who is clearly very successful, but is setting the culture for his teams and employees that this has to be an important part for them to find the success that they want.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear because it's directionally where we're trying to push, everything from healthcare. We're bringing this whole model of athlete performance out into the real world, trying to take healthcare away from just the absence of disease into optimization. I don't think people know how good they can feel. Like our job in high performance was have people feel amazing and they will perform really, really well. And so that's what we're trying to do with sleep here.
I hear you and will echo that very loudly. I think so many of us are walking zombies and you get used
Mhm.
to feeling tired and that becomes your
Yeah.
norm. And it shouldn't be because that is not truly how we are meant to
Mm.
thrive and flourish in life. But unfortunately, because of other work or social obligations,
Mhm.
sleep gets sacrificed. And then we get used to feeling in
Right.
this fatigued or regularly tired state. Now, I think what's so enlightening is that when you actually can prioritize your sleep, pay back what we call accumulated sleep debt, and this takes more than one night or one weekend of quality sleep to do so,
Mhm.
which is what most of my research has focused on. When you do this over several weeks, the benefit that you see in how you feel and function and perform honestly can be quite astounding. And I like to
Right.
share the story of Andre Iguodala, which I know, Jeremy, you've
Mhm.
heard, but I wanted to share with this audience how impactful that is because he was someone who was at the top of his game for
Mhm.
10 years in the NBA, already an all-star. And yet he asked for help with his sleep because he knew he wasn't doing it right and wanted to extend his career as long as possible. And we
Mhm.
worked together over several months to change his habits, change how he approached his sleep, not just during the night and that hour before sleeping, but throughout the day. And the benefits that he saw was incredible. It was a 9% improvement in his free throws. He saw a 29% increase in his points per minute.
Wow.
Fouls went down 45%, and turnovers also went down. And he eventually, the following year, came home with the finals MVP, has subsequently won 4 championships in total, and extended his career by 10 years. He obviously just retired, but
Wow.
that was
Yeah.
really neat to see that extension of his career. And what he talks about in many of our interviews and discussing his experience is that he didn't realize that he could feel that much better. And to me, what's fascinating is the performance capacity that he could tap into.
Mhm.
That again, even though you're already at the highest level you think you could
Yeah.
be, if this isn't an important aspect of your day to day, imagine what additional performance capacity you could tap
Yeah.
into if this really was a priority.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to why sleep is the first thing to be deprioritized or sacrificed when work goes up. Because I think high performers, that they're performing at a good level, right? They're achieving a lot, and they're feeling how they feel, right? Maybe not optimum, but they're in that sort of zombie state where they're just used to that. And it's what do you have in reserve? That's the fascinating piece for me, is what's that next step? And what were some of those steps that you saw with Andre that needed to be taken
Oh, there
to
was a
stop him
lot.
sacrificing? Yeah.
There was a lot. But no, no, not to take anything away from Andre. He's a phenomenal
Right.
athlete. On the sleep side, yes, we did have to make some changes.
Hmm.
Some of the adjustments we made was one, he was taking very long naps, 2 to 3 hours often. And that can, one, impact your sleep at night. So you don't have the sleep drive to sleep when you want to.
Hmm.
And it also can lead you into waking up out of deeper stages of sleep. So you feel more groggy and sluggish, which is not the state you want to be in when you have to go out and perform at your best. He also didn't have a good approach to his sleep in the evening time. So, like many of us who have a racing mind, would be in bed, have thoughts going through your head, and not able to then fall asleep when desired. So,
Hmm.
we restructured how we approached to sleep, taking time every night to stretch and do breathing exercises outside of bed. And so that gave him a time to process everything that happened in the day, plan for the next day. And then you go into a period of actually winding down with something that's
Hmm.
relaxing. For him, it was reading. And so then he would read for a couple of minutes. And that would be the typical process, which I think we can all do, where it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a long, 30 minutes to an hour. Even the challenge to do 5 minutes of something that's relaxing that will prepare your brain and your body to sleep is what I would challenge everyone listening today to start with.
Yeah, that's amazing, because immediately the athlete dropped away, right? The human is what remained as you described that. This wasn't some fancy red light therapy bed that cost a bunch of money. It wasn't a fancy supplement. The parallels, and again, we're going back to that performance element. I don't think people recognize the parallels between elite sport and performance outside of sport. All we're trying to do is get the body into a peak performance state, and your brain and your body can be manipulated to increase its capacity and fulfill your potential. And so, really simple solutions like that are impactful, whether you're going to go and play in an NBA playoff game or whether you're going to make big decisions in your meetings as an executive.
Definitely. And these don't have to take a lot of time either. Like I
Mhm.
mentioned, 5, 10 minutes of a wind down routine and a way to process your thoughts. So it's not a racing mind when you're in bed, or
Mhm.
evaluating your sleep environment. We often take it for granted, but if you took a second to actually evaluate, is it dark, quiet,
Mhm.
cool, comfortable, and consistent? Not just at home, but also when you're on the road. And I know
Right.
many of us travel frequently. And so making sure you then have tools to optimize a non ideal sleep environment, I think can be incredibly helpful. And that's something
Mhm.
that Andre also leveraged during our time.
So you mentioned a few of the factors that are the pillars of sleep hygiene as we've come to know it. When you mentioned we need a dark room, a cold room, quiet room, how dark are we talking? Because most people think, oh, turn the light off. It's darkish. Is that good enough?
I will say the darker the better.
Right,
So
right,
I am a big fan of investing in blackout curtains. They
right.
can be incredibly helpful to eliminate all light in the room.
Hmm.
Sometimes you will still have light creep out through the sides. And so either have curtain clips or an eye mask can be very easy to use both at home and then as a tool you can bring on the road
Yeah.
very easily as well and pack it in a travel sleep kit. So it is a factor that frequently disrupts sleep. And a lot of folks don't realize that if you're not using blackout curtains or you have a lot of light coming into the room, especially as we are in spring and summer,
Mm,
some of that light streaming into the room can wake people up. And they may not recall it consciously, but
right.
sometimes we can see that objectively where there's more tossing and turning in those morning hours.
Hmm.
And it can be sometimes attributed to light.
Yeah, well, I know in our house, we have the shutters rather than blinds, and So I need the eye mask because we've got the street lights, we've got, security lights, they'll be on and off in the background. So first of all, the curtain clips are genius, but the eye mask has been a must for me, both with travel. I've been on the road with teams for the majority of the last 20 years. So for travel, you never know how you're going to be able to control the environment. So that was a really clutch for me. And what about the underrated influence of lights on all of the electronics in your room?
Yes, the blue light exposure. So
Hmm.
the general recommendation is we do want to avoid the blue light from our devices.
Hmm.
Half hour, an hour before bed would be preferable. The evidence is a little bit more mixed now of specifically how that can affect your sleep.
Right.
Earlier evidence did suggest that it can delay the onset of your own melatonin, which is the signal that sleep will be coming, as well as delay the onset of sleep when desired. Now, the interesting kind of updates is that beyond just the light, we also now understand it's about the content of what we are
Hmm.
viewing
Hmm.
on our devices. So, content that clearly can be more stimulating, anxiety provoking, perhaps in the world today, and other
Oh,
content that's
something
meant
going on?
to keep you that's meant to keep you up. Those can we recognize are an important factor beyond purely the blue frequencies of
Hmm.
light.
Hmm.
And so it is an important consideration. What are you doing? And I would encourage everyone to think about, using your devices just earlier in the evening time.
Hmm.
Two, trying to give yourself dim light in the evening time so you're not in the bright lights to help set yourself up to prepare to sleep. And then three, prioritizing another relaxing activity that you look forward to doing. So it doesn't feel like homework, but something that you want to do, whether that's journaling or reading a book that you've been meaning to read, or for some athletes, stretching and breathing exercises are really easy go-to strategies. And that can be a better system to set yourself up
Hmm.
for success, because really one challenge I really encourage everyone to make a shift is in their mindset about sleep.
Hmm.
And it sounds small, but thinking about sleep as not the end of today, but the beginning of tomorrow. And it sounds small, and I'll repeat that. Think of sleep not as the end of today, but as the beginning of tomorrow. Means that how you invest in your sleep and your recovery tonight will impact every aspect of how you function tomorrow. And it sounds like a small change, but it's powerful because it really then can shift how you perceive the importance of sleep in your 24-hour day.
Yeah, that's genius, and what a great reframe. I've never actually thought of it like that, but so true. It literally is like how you're going to spend your next day is determined by that period. So great reframe. We refer to that as sort of the on ramp to sleep. And I heard you talk about it on a recent podcast about the difference between going from 60 miles an hour and then slamming on your brakes versus a nice gradual slowdown. I think that there's an obvious need for a transition in mindset here, and I love those tips on gradually slowing down the racing mind. What are some other strategies that people can use if they are prone to a racing mind, which I think a lot of high performers are?
Yeah, definitely. We all struggle with the racing mind at some point.
Hmm.
So, having, I would say, one or even better, two strategies that you know work for you gives you an alternative if one option may not be working for a given night. I really recommend journaling
Hmm.
as the first strategy, because there's probably some aspect we think of cognitive offloading that can happen when you just throw your thoughts down onto paper. It can be, just words. You can do a full entry, whatever works for you to get your thoughts out. I encourage you to do that outside of bed. And the
Hmm.
reason why is because we really want our bed to be just for sleep and sex, and that's it.
Right.
The more time you spend in bed doing other activities like work or technology or other waking activities, your brain starts to associate those activities with being awake in bed. And that's not the association we want. So we want to deassociate that and have you do those activities outside of bed, process your thoughts. And then when you're sleepy and more tired, then you get into bed and therefore strengthen that association of being asleep in bed. Hopefully that makes sense. But
Yeah.
journaling is one recommendation. Journaling isn't your thing, I also recommend writing a to-do list. It
Oh,
gives a
interesting.
lot of folks a time to think through the tasks that they need to do for the following day, but can put it down on paper and be reassured that they can come back to it the following morning and know that those are the tasks they need to accomplish. Or the third option is a worry journal, a little different than just journaling, but specifically going through the items that they're concerned about, that they want to tackle, and giving themselves that time to do so again before they get into bed.
Yeah, I really resonate particularly with that last one. Michelle, more so with the to-do list. For me, not so much. The worry journal, that's usually what my racing mind is about. I'm anxious about something I've got coming up, I'm supposed to be doing, I'm procrastinating on. Right? And so just getting that out of my mind and onto a page, I found to be incredibly helpful. And you mentioned with Andre, reading was a big part of his process. Where does that fall? Is that something that we can do in bed, or do we need to do that out of bed and then transition to the bed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Andre used reading as his relaxing wind down activity. I would say if it's something that you're doing regularly already in bed and have found that that's relaxing and can drift off to sleep well after that, then you can continue to do so. If you're starting this as a new activity, I would say start outside of bed as a first step. And then when you feel like you're tired and more sleepy, then transition and go back to bed and sleep.
Mhm. I found the combination of the journal and then the reading for me, one, offloading from my brain whatever I was worrying about, whatever I had to do, and then secondly, distracting me from it and letting my brain engage in the material I was reading. I had a bad habit of reading work related material. So I'm reading leadership books. So I'm reading, different things that related to my work in bed. So switching to something that's completely unrelated was a really great transition for me. And I actually saw on my sleep monitor I was wearing at the time a direct correlation between all my markers of sleep quality, whether it be HRV, heart rate, um, time in sleep stages. Everything improved when I would read before bed.
That's wonderful. I love that you've had the ability to reflect on objective
Mhm.
outcomes as well from
Right.
your wearable, because I think, again, it is so challenging for us to always know what's happening during our sleep because we're not consciously aware of it. And so having some of those trends documented for you to review over weeks to months, I think can definitely be
Mhm.
helpful. I will add for those listening, I encourage both the way to process your thoughts and that wind down routine is to establish that at home
Mhm.
when things are good and you don't have a lot of stressors, because the more that you build that foundation, when there are those acute stressors or life events that happen or emergencies that come up, your brain and your body will be primed and ready, that you have this foundational approach already ready to go. So you can always fall back on it and be more reassured that you have a strategy in place. And then, of course, there's additional tools that we can take out of the tool belt to try when you have those more acute stressed events.
Mhm. Yeah, another amazing point, because we so often wait to implement these solutions until we're actually in crisis. Right? Okay, I've had a terrible day. Everything's going wrong at work. I'm going to meditate.
Yes.
Okay, well, that might not go so well.
Exactly. So you could try to establish it earlier. I think you'll find more
Yeah.
success.
Yeah, brilliant. And so we've talked a little bit about the parallels here between the pro athlete and the high performing, let's say, executive. We view them as cognitive athletes. They're using their brain power at an incredibly high level. It's decision making, it's accuracy of decisions, it's reaction time, it's memory, working memory. All of these aspects of being a high performing executive. And then one that's, I think, underrated in leadership is emotional regulation. I'd love to make that transition into sleep for leadership and sleep for the executive. Can you speak to some of those factors on what sleep's going to do for me as a leader as we talk about that cognitive performance element?
Definitely. So, as a high performer as well, when you're an executive, Jeremy, you've touched on some of these cognitive factors that are going to be so critical for you to be and show up as your best self every day,
Hmm.
which is sleep is so essential to make good decisions. It's imperative that you have sleep to have good judgment and reaction time, because we all are going to have to react and respond appropriately. Now, it affects emotions. And so you can be more irritable with insufficient sleep. You can have more emotional ability when you're sleep deprived. How you interact with coworkers and others at work can all be very much affected, as mood is one of the first
Mm.
things that can be impacted with sleep loss. And then, especially how you function in the daytime. So, it will affect your emotions and how you therefore function in the daytime. But it's not just about making the correct decisions. I also think what gets often overlooked is that you can make incorrect decisions and you can make cognitive errors when you are
Hmm.
sleep deprived. And that is, to me, equally important. Not just that you're making the right ones, but you can be making the incorrect ones. And you actually don't have a lot of ability to control which ones are good decisions and which ones
Right,
are poor decisions. So
right,
it's just this kind of lottery of which one is going to happen when you're in the sleep deprived state, which I don't think
right.
for most is going to be the ideal state that you want to be in when you're making these very critical decisions for your
Yeah.
company. So I think those are incredibly important aspects to recognize,
Hmm.
that you can be impacted in these ways, even if you don't realize it, that it can be occurring when you're just going about your day to day.
Yeah, one of the fascinating findings I read about the other day was just one night of sleep deprivation for the leader, and their team immediately sense a lack of psychological safety on one night. And I think that lack of psychological safety in your team from the leader being sleep deprived is going to compromise all communication, all decision making. Everybody's going to back into a position of safety and not take any risks. And so I think it can be quite profound for your leader to model good sleep, not only for the good of the employees, but just the performance of the team.
Oh, definitely. I think you hit that one on the head where, as a leader, you're setting the culture of your company. And
Hmm.
I think that that can be arguably the most important part,
Hmm. Hmm.
because healthy sleep sets your company up and your employees to be happier and healthier and more productive. So we know that healthy sleep sets your company up for your employees just to be their happiest, healthiest selves and to be most
Hmm.
productive for the company. And we know that, as we've discussed, the productivity hours are not increased by having less sleep. We know that you actually are more productive with better rested teams.
When you work with executives, what are some of the major sleep disruptors that you start seeing right off the bat that can help people improve quality of sleep and potentially duration of sleep?
It's a great question. I think that the cultures of sport and then executives are very similar in many
Yeah.
ways, but also quite different, right? So, I'll start with similarities actually, which is that we do know, as we talked about, the buckets of duration, the quality, and the timing are going to be important whether you're an elite athlete or you're an executive.
Hmm.
Where some of the differences come in is scheduling, of course, thinking about when you want to peak for performance,
Mm.
thinking about the timing of when you need to be at your best. So that can mean an earlier time in the day, say 10 in the morning, or it could mean that you know that you have a project coming up. So there's going to be a week you need to be at your best, but you know you're going to be short on sleep. So planning
Hmm.
strategically for these periods can be, I think, different in these demographics. Yeah, I know that short sleep can be challenging for many folks. So it always comes up as a question: what should we do when we know we're not going to get the sleep that we need? So some of the strategies that you can think about, that have worked for all high performers is one, yes, caffeine and
Hmm.
short power nap. So 20 to 30 minutes is really all you really need to give yourself a boost for a couple of hours.
Hmm.
Using those two strategically when you're going to have a dip in your alertness or just need to get through another couple of hours into the evening can be advantageous. You want to leverage sleep tools to optimize your sleep in your environment, both at home and when you travel. Number three, you want to minimize alcohol when we know you're going to be short on sleep, because
Yeah.
alcohol really can fragment your sleep, especially the
Mm.
morning hours when you get most of that REM dreaming sleep. So do yourself a favor, skip the evening cocktails, and
Hmm.
if you know you're going to be short, then give yourself the chance to have the best quality at nighttime.
That's one of the areas that I've really noticed outside of sport. I think it was a big problem in sport, and we've moved
Mhm.
away from that. That's personally why I stopped drinking alcohol, because the impact it was having on my sleep. I don't think that that is present yet in the high performer outside of sport. I don't think that alcohol has really been recognized yet as one of these major performance disruptors.
I agree with you. I see a lot of executives who will still say, all right, I have a big project, I'm traveling, we have to go out for drinks the night before, we're having these
Right?
big meetings. And I'm like, well, it might be one area to, get a mocktail tonight instead if
Yeah.
you have to present in the morning time, because you're
Mhm.
going to give yourself better quality rest if you do so. And I agree with you. I think it hasn't yet to make that leap to the high performing executive really recognizing how much of an impact it can have on your sleep. It doesn't have to always be high doses of alcohol. Even some smaller, moderate to even lower doses potentially could be disruptive for individuals. So that one I think is an important one to key in on. I'm going to add a couple more here. Morning sunlight is an easy strategy to implement when you're short on sleep. So getting 30 minutes of sunlight, that will give you a boost in alertness and also help lock in your body clock, especially if you're traveling and you're having to combat jet lag. So that
Mhm.
is a useful tool that is pretty easy to implement. And you don't have to be outside, but even being by windows, opening your blinds, you should be able to still get sufficient
Mhm.
sunlight to help lock that in. Um, Now, be careful when you're out on the road. Use ride shares or have someone else drive if you know you're short on sleep, because you really can have these very dangerous micro sleeps where you blink and your eyes close
Mhm.
for a second, and that can be incredibly dangerous for yourself and for others, since
Mhm.
a lot of fatalities are often due to drowsy driving. And then the
Wow.
last strategy I will throw in is that you want to leverage recovery sleep. I think a lot of executives don't leverage the opportunities then to make up accumulated sleep debt when they have the opportunities, and or don't recognize that following a period where they're short on sleep, that they should try to make that an important strategy so that they can recover what a bit of what was lost in that
Mhm.
period.
Well, that's really interesting, because I think we've been told for a long time that once you've lost sleep, you've lost it. There's no making it up and there's no banking it. So, what does that look like then to make up sleep debt? How long
Yes.
does it take?
So sleep debt is a real thing, and I will try to correct the misperception that we do think you can make up short-term sleep loss.
Mm.
What that means is that when you don't get the sleep your body requires, it builds up like a debt or a credit card, is how I think of it.
Mhm.
Put into numbers, let's say your body needs 8 hours every night, but you only get 6 hours for the work week, Monday to Friday. Now that means you're in debt of 2 hours each of those nights. So after those 5 days, Monday to Friday, you've built up 10 hours of debt,
Mhm.
right? Say you sleep in on Saturday to 10 hours, hypothetically, you will feel a little bit better and more refreshed, but you've only paid back 2 hours of that debt, right? In the big picture that you owed 10 for the week.
Mhm.
And so most of my research or some of my earlier work has looked at how to pay that back over multiple weeks, because the reality is that most people only give themselves one night or maybe one weekend to catch up on that sleep. And while, yes, you do feel better with that recovery opportunity, you really haven't made that much of a dent into that sleep debt. When you pay back sleep debt over multiple weeks, that's where we've seen the biggest benefit. And that's where I showed basketball players at Stanford increased their shooting percentage by 9%. And
Wow.
that was free throws and 3-point shots they reacted 12% faster. Their sprint times were 4% faster. But that was
Mhm.
after 5 to 7 weeks. And you might say, okay, Dr. Ma, that's crazy. That's such a long time. I don't
Right.
know if I can invest that. And that's okay. But I've started to look at shorter intervals of even perhaps 5 days of getting that additional hour of sleep and shown that benefit. And colleagues have also replicated these findings where 1 week of that additional recovery sleep improved tennis serving accuracy. And
Right.
so the bottom line is that you can pay back short term sleep loss. It's a little more questionable. Can you pay back, decades and decades of sleep loss after obviously there can be some physiologic consequences of chronic sleep loss. And I think the jury's still out a little bit on there, but I would encourage you to pay back at least short term periods of sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and that's something that we're all about here is what we can't influence, fine. There's so much that we can influence. And you start this program and you just start acting in the right way, and we can layer all of these effects and really start undoing and unwinding some of those physiological damages that may have been done in so many ways, from lifting to cardiovascular exercise to sleep, nutrition. I think the power of what is in your control far outweighs the stuff that is not. And this is such a powerful piece of it for me that we must keep emphasizing this for both performance and for your health.
You make such a good point, too, that it doesn't have to mean huge changes, right?
Mhm.
Especially with your sleep, it's all about small, gradual steps that will add up over time. And it doesn't have to take a lot to actually
Mhm.
get better rest, not just with duration. We've talked about 15 minutes more is 15
Right.
minutes more, it can make the difference. It's the difference of an A student to a B student. And a
Is that
B
right?
student, yes, and the B
Wow.
student to a C student is only 11 minutes more sleep.
Wow.
So it doesn't take a lot. And there was a recent study that came out in adolescents, but that 15 minutes was again replicated and shown that those that had 7 hours and 25 minutes versus those that had 7 hours and 10 minutes. So, again, 15 minutes difference. They had bigger brain volumes and they performed better on cognitive tasks about
Mhm.
vocabulary, of reading, and of problem solving.
Wow.
So, it doesn't take a lot, even on the duration or on the quality. Small things like the 5 minutes of a wind down routine
Mm.
or shortening your power naps or making sure you're going out and getting morning sunlight. Those are all great first steps, and then you can build on that till you've seen as you continue to see success with your sleep.
Mhm. That longer term, more steady paying back of the debt um, can potentially be better than trying to make up all of that in a weekend, right? So we hear about jet lag, but I've recently come across the term social jet lag, where we actually temporarily shift our time zone because we end up sleeping an extra 2 3 hours at the weekend, and we move our circadian rhythm and then try and get up at the normal time on Monday and find that it's a real struggle.
Definitely. Social jet lag is a real thing as well. Um, Typically, most people will stay up later on a Friday or a Saturday
Hmm.
night because they have other social obligations they would like to attend to. And then they often sleep 2 to 3 hours later than typical and wake up 2 to 3 hours later, as you've just mentioned, or they're trying to catch up on their sleep. And so you can feel the same symptoms of jet lag by not even getting on an airplane. So
Wow.
just shifting that schedule when you're in your home zone, you can feel fatigued. You can have, GI upset. You can feel off during the day and just really not at your best, all without even crossing any time zones. And so, as I know, easier said than done, but some of the strategies we've talked about, especially with timing, apply ideally both on weekdays and weekends. And, this isn't to say don't go out and have fun and enjoy some of these events, but, can we be a little bit smarter about it and
Mhm.
narrow, say, a 3 hour shift in your bedtime to maybe, an hour or hour and a half? and then keep your wake time a little closer aligned. Still maybe get another half hour, hour more, but let's not sleep until noontime when you typically
Right.
wake up at 6 in the
Uh,
morning, because it will be a rough day.
yeah, that's right. And how should people manage? We talking about actual jet lag. In sport we had very variable schedules. Often executives who are traveling and people who travel a lot will have to navigate that. What are some strategies that you've put in place to help people mitigate that, knowing that again, some of the results in sport can be dependent on whether you're an East Coast or a West Coast team?
Yes. So, a framework I wanted to share with everyone is to think about every trip as having three phases.
Hmm.
So, pre flight, in flight, and post flight. And what that means is that for every trip that you take, you should try to have a plan of strategies that you'll employ before you even get on the airplane, what you do in the airplane, and then what you do when you land. Because the status quo is that most people just get on an airplane, get to a new location, they try to adjust. And
Yeah.
that is not a great strategy when you could be more strategic and have done things even before getting on the airplane or in flight. Now, what those things are can depend a bit on which direction you're traveling, whether that is eastward, where your clock is advancing, versus if you're going westward and your clock is shifting backwards or being
Mhm.
more delayed. But the things that you can consider doing in pre flight, definitely getting sufficient sleep in the nights leading up to the flight, because we know if you're short on sleep, that can make jet lag worse.
Mhm.
If you're going eastward, you can actually shift your bedtime and wake time gradually by about 30 minutes to 60 minutes in the days leading up, so that you have less time zones to actually shift by the time you arrive at your destination.
Right.
In flight, hydration, trying to get your body clock onto the destination time zone, which can mean aligning your eating times with the times of the
Mhm.
destination, because every cell in your body has a clock, and those communicate to your master clock in your brain that controls your, as we've discussed, circadian rhythm. And so timing your meals when you're sleeping on the airplane can be really helpful cues to your body even before you land. Then when you
Right.
land, there's the right exposure to sun to start to shift the clock. Using strategic caffeine and power naps are also going to be important factors to consider. To answer your question about variable schedules, it's hard because obviously your schedule may not always be your own when you get to a destination. But if you have the ability to control when some of your important meetings can be, I would try to look strategically at not having them occur when they're at the lulls in your body clock based on your
Right.
home time zone. Because the rule of thumb is for every time zone you cross, it takes about 1 day for your body clock to adjust. So that
Right.
means if you are on the West Coast and you're going to the East Coast, it will take 3 days, because you've crossed three time zones, for your body clock to adjust. Even if you feel better after 1 day, it still really hasn't caught up. So do
Mhm.
yourself a favor, and if you don't have to have your important meetings or presentations on that first day, maybe make that the second day or the third day. That would be preferable.
Oh, that's excellent advice there. And what are some of the projects you're currently working on?
Oh, I have a couple in the pipeline, so more to come when I can share. But uh, no, I still am working with a number of professional sports teams across the leagues. I do work with more high performers now that are in not traditional sport. So have worked with different companies and organizations helping to build sleep programs for their executives, for their employees, and building that out to be a longitudinal programs as part of their health and wellness initiatives.
Wonderful. And as we wrap up then, if you were to give three takeaways for people listening today who are just starting their journey with improving their sleep, what would you tell people to go away today and try out right away?
Okay, my three take home points. Number one, I want to encourage you to make that powerful but small shift in your mindset. So remember, sleep is not the end of today, it is the beginning of tomorrow. Number two, it is all about small, gradual changes. So start with something small tonight, whether that's 5 minutes of a wind down routine, reading a book, or it is taking 5 minutes to start journaling. Make it that habit tonight and every day this week and build on it from there. Or maybe you say, okay, I'll do that 15 minutes more sleep. So start with 15 minutes today, every day this week, and you will have gained almost 2 extra hours of sleep after a week if you're successful in that 15 minutes. And I know we all can do 15 minutes more. So gradual changes are best. And then number 3 is I would encourage this particular audience of listeners to invest in building a culture that really prioritizes and respects sleep. You are the leaders of your company, and what you do will trickle down to your employees. They will be happier, healthier, more productive for you.
Those are amazing takeaways. What have you found to be the most effective way for people to start this process?
Great question. To start making small changes to your sleep, set some personal goals with duration, with quality, and the timing of your sleep. Again, they don't have to be big shifts. Small changes are a way to start. I also would highly recommend doing this with a team. And that can be your spouse or your significant other. Maybe it's a coworker, or maybe this is even like an exercise partner that you have the conversation about, hey, these are some of my sleep goals. Can we actually align and have you hold me accountable so that we really can make these changes together? What I found is that when you have a system set up that better supports your sleep habits, particularly if you have a bed partner, aligning some of those strategies and goals makes it a lot easier for you to be able to find success in reaching your own sleep goals. So find a partner, find someone that you can do this with, and I think it'll be a much more enjoyable process.
Yeah, what a great idea. I found that with nutrition. It's very hard to change your diet if the people in your house don't change theirs. I think this would be
Exactly.
very, very similar. You go to bed early and then your partner comes in and they get in bed and wake you up. And I think the whole thing is going to fall apart pretty quick, huh?
Exactly. So it's always helpful, particularly the bed partner, to have that conversation. And generally, people are aligned with wanting to do better with their sleep. So it's another motivation for someone else in the household to get better rest.
And where can we follow along with this, and how can people get in touch to potentially work with you?
Sure. Feel free to reach out. I have a website. It is www.drcherimah.com. That's DRCHERIMAH.com. Or you can follow along on my social media. That's either on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, LinkedIn at Dr. Cheri Mah. So it's at DRCHERIMAH. And feel free to sign up for my newsletter if you want to keep up the latest on research and tips. Feel free to go to my website and sign up there.
Well, Dr. Mah, thank you so much for that. This has been such a wonderful chat, and really looking forward to following along with what you've got next, and can't wait to work with you again in the future here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. Today's conversation with Dr. Cheri Mah made it clear why sleep might just be the most overlooked tool in your performance toolkit. Let's recap 3 of the most impactful takeaways. Number 1, sleep is the beginning of tomorrow. Thinking about sleep as the beginning of tomorrow instead of the end of today helps us see its value as the foundation for everything that follows. Number 2, small, consistent improvements matter. Just 15 more minutes of rest each night or a 5-minute wind-down routine can create measurable results. Number 3, your sleep sets the tone for your team. Leaders who prioritize sleep not only show up sharper, but create healthier, more productive cultures. If today's discussion sparked something for you, and you're looking for ways to integrate personalized health strategies and strength-based longevity into your life, we'd love to help. At Vitality Collective, we've built these principles into a comprehensive system designed to optimize health and performance at any stage of life. If you're ready to take action and see how this approach could work for you, visit www.vitality-collective.com to learn more. Thanks for listening. and we'll see you next time.